I'm very impressed with the movement as a movement for peace, a reconciliation between people who come from different ethnicities or different religions. I'm Alan Wolf. I'm a resident of the city of New Orleans. I'm a senior partner at the law firm of Phelps Dunbar here in the city. The Hizmet movement that I've come into contact with here in New Orleans and on a immersion trip that the movement sponsored for myself and a number of other people here in New Orleans has given me what I think is an in-depth contact with the Hizmet movement and what it's about. And what has impressed me about it is that it really gets it. It actually focuses on what Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have in common, which is a recognition of the value, worth, and dignity of every human being, regardless of their accidental characteristics. So I'm very impressed with the movement as a movement for peace, a reconciliation between people who come from different ethnicities, or different religions, different backgrounds, different geographies, to promote peace and harmony and respect for human life. At the same time, I recognize the movement is very focused on education as a particular practical focus for achieving really the advancement of understanding and harmonious living among peoples of the world. And I am impressed that the Hizmet movement recognizes that a great deal of the enmity, rivalry, hatred, if you will, that exists in the world between people who are different, comes from ignorance and lack of education and lack of contact. So, to me, two features of Hizmet that have especially impressed me are the educational emphasis and the emphasis upon contact between Westerners and Easterners, between Muslims, Christians, and Jews, with the idea that education and actual personal face-to-face contact will bring down the false barriers that separate people. And I think Hizmet is very focused on that. Of course, I've never met Mr. Gulen, and nor have I read his books. So my views on Fethullah Gulen come from how he's reflected in the Hizmet movement and the people I've met in the movement, both here and in Turkey. And what I've uniformly seen is a spirit of openness, open-heartedness, generosity, warmth, kindness, hospitality, acceptance of the differences between people, toleration of the differences between people, and an appreciation of the essential worth and goodness of essentially everyone. I've also in everyone seen reflected an open-minded attitude about understanding the ideas and viewpoints of people from divergent and disparate backgrounds. So I know that the Hizmet people I've met are very devoted to Fethullah Gulen. They mention him frequently, and I take it that the values expressed are the teachings and values of Fethullah Gulen. So again, I'm very impressed with Mr. Gulen as a spiritual leader of the movement. I think Hizmet's interfaith activities are vitally important in a world that is so riven by religious violence and religious misunderstanding and conflicts between whole populations that are often fanned and manipulated by people who claim to have religious agendas. So for the Hizmet movement to promote interreligious dialogue is an antidote to the manipulation and exploitation of religion to separate people and to in some cases even promote agendas of racial and religious genocide. So I think that it's vitally important to combat those really evil phenomena, and Hizmet is, I think, in the forefront of movements in the world to confront that and to address that. And I think it's incredibly admirable that here in the West we have an Islamic movement that works for that, in which Catholics and Jews can feel very comfortable in participating in without having to focus on whether we or it are Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, because I think the movement transcends these religious differences. I think Hizmet's emphasis upon education is extremely prescient in understanding that raising the standard of living and the quality of life for people throughout the world, particularly in what we call, and particularly in impoverished or modest circumstances, is key to advancement. Not only in terms of developing vocational skills, but also in developing social skills and self-confidence and pride and the ability to be constructive members of a human community and to actually feel a sense of human solidarity with local communities and the human community as a whole. I think that Hizmet has put its finger on ignorance as one of the fundamental causes of human impoverishment of the spirit, and impoverishment materially, impoverishment spiritually, and that it's very practical for it to think of education as a ladder up for people, and to emphasize that as a fundamental method for social and political advancement. I think Hizmet's charitable activities are key to the completion and credibility of its total program, because as I understand the Hizmet movement, its fundamental philosophical and theological basis is its recognition that the love of God's love for us and our love for God is the fundamental phenomenon of human life. And I think that Hizmet's reflection of that fundamental concept of love as the essential experience that we as human beings have, expressed and reflected in charitable activities, is the most effective way, single way for Hizmet to express the idea of love. It's the clearest, most dramatic, most credible way for the Hizmet movement to reflect its fundamental theology. And I think that for it to do so, not so much in preaching, but in active charitable works, further, in an important way, advances its overall goals to lift human life to a higher qualitative level, and at the same time establish an additional degree of credibility to its educational and interfaith and interreligious dialogue work. As to criticisms of the Hizmet movement as too good to be true, after a number of years of contact with the Hizmet movement, both here in New Orleans and in Turkey, I have never, ever experienced from anyone or any activity of Hizmet anything other than a active and sincere commitment to human brotherhood and sisterhood. There's never been a word said, an action taken by anyone that I've come into contact with that is other than an authentic expression of human solidarity, and I think I've seen a lot of the Hizmet movement through the trip to Turkey, through going to its educational institutions, its charitable institutions, the Journalists Foundation, Teachers Foundation, meeting with, being a guest of families in their homes, have met a wide variety of people here and in Turkey in Hizmet and seen their activities, and there's never been a single comment, action, or any evidence after a great deal of exposure that has suggested anything other than a true and sincere commitment to advancing the human race to all forms of prosperity as we understand them.
Hizmet's interfaith activities are an important educational tool which lead to more understanding and respect and cooperation between people of very different religious faith traditions.
Hizmet talks about love, it talks about reaching out to others, and it not only talks about it, it puts it into practice. So we see Hizmet active throughout the world, taking care of people in need.